Ready, Your Honor.
All right, call your next witness.
Your Honor, I'd like to call Chief Barry Weber to the stand, please.
Get your popcorn. This is what we've all been waiting for.
Morning, Chief. You can remove your mask while you testify.
Thank you, sir.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please be seated. State and spell your first and last name.
Share this out.
My name is Barry, B-A-R-R-Y, Weber, W-E-B-E-R.
Now, Chief Weber, how long have you been the chief for the Wauwatosa Police Department?
The end of this month will be 31 years.
Okay. And when did you first start with Wauwatosa Police Department?
May 29th, 1990.
Okay. And about how many officers do you supervise?
We were at full strength, 96.
On June 23rd, 2016, were you working as a chief for the Wauwatosa Police Department?
Yes.
And are you a supervisor to Joseph Mensah?
Ultimately, yes.
Okay. As the chief of the Wauwatosa Police Department, are you part of any associations?
Yes.
What associations are you a part of?
The International Association of Chiefs of Police, Milwaukee County Law Enforcement Executive Association, Wisconsin Police Executive Group, Wauwatosa Rotary Club, Wauwatosa Chamber of Commerce, FBI National Academy Associates.
Okay. And on June 23rd, 2016, well, actually, how long have you been part of these associations? I'm sorry, I should ask you that first. Could you give, like, how long for each?
Just about almost the 31 years with all of them.
Okay. Now, what I'd like to show you is what's been marked as Exhibit 65. Actually, when? Sorry. Do you recall receiving a letter from DA Kent Laverne dated December 5th, 2016 regarding the J. Anderson Jr. shooting?
Yes.
And in that letter, Kent Laverne indicated that he was refusing to charge Joseph Mensah in relation to that shooting. Is that correct?
He declined, correct.
Okay. And you received a copy of this, right?
Yes.
And do you recall also receiving a letter, or at least seeing a copy of a letter from the Department of Justice that was sent to Attorney Safran?
I believe it was sent. I don't remember the letter, though.
Okay. Now, in that letter, and Your Honor, I've marked it as Exhibit 64.
Okay.
With regards to the Department of Justice letter that's dated February 16, 2016, do you recall the Department of Justice saying that they've been reviewing the investigative materials that the DA's office gave them, and they are declining to essentially move forward with, as I interpret it, intentional homicide charges against Officer Joseph Mensah?
I don't remember the letter.
Your Honor, if it's possible, I'd like to present to Chief Weber the letter to refresh his memory.
Yeah, go ahead.
Weber's pissed.
Let him know when you've had a chance to read it, Chief.
It's Milwaukee.
I've read it.
Now, based on this letter dated February 16th, 2016, Exhibit 64, the first sentence is that the federal authorities have been reviewing investigative materials regarding the fatal shooting of Jay Anderson by Wauwatosa Police Officer Joseph Mensah on June 23rd, 2016, in order to determine if there's a basis for prosecuting Officer Mensah for a civil rights violation under federal law. Is that correct?
That's what it says, yes.
Okay. And based, as far as you know, has the Department of Justice ever spoken to you with regards to the shooting of Jay Anderson Jr.?
Not that I recall, and I don't remember ever seeing this letter either until just now.
Okay. And has the district attorney's office ever spoken to you with regards to the Jay Anderson shooting?
After I got that letter from Ken Lover and dated in December of 2016, that would be it.
Okay. But prior to them making the decision to not issue charges against Joseph Mensah in December 2016, the district attorney's office of Milwaukee County did not communicate with you?
No, they probably, I may have gone to a meeting with the district attorney's office like a week ahead of time before the letter came out, so I knew that it was going to be coming out.
Okay. And with regards to your day-to-day, and just sort of specifically looking at the June 23rd, 2016 time period, how often did you interact with Joseph Mensah?
Joseph was assigned to the late shift, so I don't interact very often with the late shift officers unless I see them in passing.
Mm-hmm. How often did you communicate with Joseph Mensah around June 23rd, 2016?
I saw him that morning at the scene, but prior to that, I had not talked to him for a while.
So you saw him the morning of June 23rd, 2016.
That's correct.
Do you recall what time?
Probably would have been around 3:45 or 4 a.m.
Okay. And when you saw him at 3:45, 4 a.m., did he say anything to you?
No, I asked him how he was doing, and he said he was fine. He was in the back of a squad car.
Okay.
At the
But
scene.
within that brief conversation, he didn't talk about the incident at all. Is that a fair statement?
That's true, nor would I ask him.
Okay. And did you hear him talking about the incident with anybody while you were there?
No.
Okay. Now, you're as the chief with the Wauwatosa Police Department, and just focusing on June 23rd, 2016, what are some of your duties?
Well, I've always described my job as not to run the police department, but to see that the department runs well. All the officers, they all have supervisors, sergeants, the officers report to the sergeants, who report to the lieutenants, who report to the captains, and the captains report to me.
Okay. And so are you the primary policymaker with the Wauwatosa Police Department?
Yes.
Okay. And you've written different policies in terms of, how officers are supposed to behave, or how they're supposed to work.
I have drafted policies over the years, but also now if I need policies, many times I will delegate that to a lieutenant or somebody, and they will write the policy out, and then we'll all take a look at it, and then I have final approval of it.
Okay. In August of 2016, Officer Mensah received an award, a Medal of Valor. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you say so, yes.
Okay. Why did he get a Medal of Valor?
Because of the way he's conducted himself as a police officer.
Did he get a Medal of Valor as it relates to how he conducted himself with the Antonio Gonzalez shooting?
I believe that would have been the one.
Okay. In August 2016, when he received that award, he was currently being investigated for the Jay Anderson shooting. Is that correct?
He was on administrative leave for the shooting. That is correct.
But the shooting was being investigated during that time period when he got the award.
Yes.
Do you recall if you're the one that recommended him for that award?
No, I do not make those recommendations. I have a final say-so on.
Do you recall when you made the final say-so for him to receive that award?
Probably a month or so ahead of that. I'm not sure when that was presented to me.
Okay.
I'm sorry, ahead of what, Chief?
I'm sorry.
Ahead of what?
A recommendation made to me about whether or not they would get who gets the awards.
Okay.
So the ceremony was August 2016. Typically, how far in advance do you get the recommendation for those who received awards like this?
Usually several months.
Okay. So you don't recall when the recommendation for Mensah to receive this award came to you?
I do not.
Do you recall when you approved this recommendation for him to receive the Medal of Valor Award?
No, but when I did approve it, I would approve all the other ones too.
Okay. As the policymaker for the Wauwatosa Police Department, you also can rescind your recommendations for awards, correct?
Correct.
Did you do that?
No,
Why not?
I felt he was deserving of what happened in that Gonzalez shooting, which he was recommended.
Irregardless of the fact that he was currently under investigation for the Jay Anderson
It's a
shooting.
separate incident.
So that, and you didn't think to delay his award?
We were talking about the Gonzalez incident, so no, that was a separate incident.
Okay, let's talk for fitness for duty. Let's talk about that. So what is the Wauwatosa Police Department policy as it relates to determining when an officer is fit to come back to work?
In the case of an officer-involved shooting, an officer's involved in administrative leave, and if he's cleared to come back, before we would allow him to come back, I would send him to a psychologist that we use to determine if, in that person's professional opinion, that he's able to return.
And then that psychologist communicates to you whether or not that person is able to return to work.
Yes.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, you've heard Lieutenant Roy's testimony, and he gave his memo to you as it relates to critical incidents. Do you recall before January 2010 when a Wauwatosa officer was involved in a officer-involved fatal shooting?
Yes.
When was that?
It was sometime before that, but Officer Moldenauer had been involved in a fatal shooting of a person who pointed a rifle at him.
Okay. And you don't remember what year that was?
I don't.
Okay. And what happened with, he was involved in a fatal shooting and it resulted in the suspect being
The
shot.
suspect was deceased, and the officer was found that he was acting in self-defense.
Okay. So with regards to your fit for duty policy, is that a written policy?
It may be included in some other policy. I'm not sure. I don't know if we have a fitness for duty policy. It's standalone.
Do you know what other policy your fitness for duty is included in?
It might be in the use of force policy. I'm not sure.
Now, you indicated you're part of the International Associations of Chiefs, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you've been part of that association for 31 years.
Actually, since 1984, that predated Wauwatosa.
Okay, so you've been part of the International Association of Chiefs since 1984,
Yes.
for more than 31 years.
Yes, I'm a life member.
Okay, so what's the standard put out by the International Associations of Chiefs of Police for fitness for duty evaluations?
I don't know what their standard is. I don't.
You don't know what it is?
No.
You don't know do you know if Wauwatosa Police Department follows the standard put out for fitness for duty evaluations as delineated by the International Association of Chiefs?
You know, as a member of the International Association of Chiefs, the IACP, as it's known, thinks they're the expert on everything. One size doesn't fit all for every organization, so I don't necessarily look at what IACP does. I look at what's best for our organization.
So what size fits your organization as relates to fitness for duty
Well,
evaluation?
as I said, like in a critical incident, or if somebody witnessed a tragic loss of a child or a bizarre incident or whatever, and I felt that they needed to have some more counseling, we do send people for counseling. If I think that there's something more that needs to be done, and I'm just not sure about what their ability or what their fitness is, I'll send them to get that opinion.
Okay. So was it your opinion that Joseph Mensah needed to be evaluated after the Antonio Gonzalez shooting?
Well, because it was a fatality involved and he used his firearm, yes, I wanted fitness for duty for him.
And typically when the psychologist communicates with you to determine whether or not an officer is fit for duty, how do they do they send you an email? Do they send you a letter? How does that work?
It can go, usually I get a phone call, and then perhaps a follow-up letter, not always. And I don't ask anything about the officer's abilities as far as mental condition or whatever, it's just like yes or no, because it's not my business to know what their particular mental problems are or any other personal issues they have. I just need to know, are they able to work or can't they work? Just a yes or no.
Well, to be fair, a psychologist would not call you up and give you personal medical details of someone, correct? Because they have HIPAA.
Right.
So that phone call would never happen where they would give you that information.
Right. That's never happened. That's what I was trying to say.
Okay, thank you. Now, when they call you and they determine that someone, not someone, let's say with regards to Officer Joseph Mensah, right? You never received a phone call after the Antonio Gonzalez shooting that he was fit for duty. Is that correct?
I don't remember.
You never received an email that Joseph Mensah was fit for duty after the Antonio Gonzalez shooting. Is that correct?
Not that I recall.
But typically you would get something in writing to say, yes, he's fit for duty.
Not always in writing, because I've known the psychologist for years, so oftentimes he might just call me and say, he's okay, put him back to work, it's fine.
But Chief, to be fair, Wauwatosa doesn't deal with a lot of officer-involved fatal shootings, correct?
Thankfully, that's true.
Yeah, thankfully that's true. So this isn't a typical situation. Based on your testimony, there was one prior officer that was involved in an officer-involved shooting. You don't recall when that was, before January 2010. So this isn't a typical situation. Is that correct?
Correct.
So it'd be expected that you would want something in writing, especially as it relates to basic standard operating procedures for fitness for duty evaluations.
Well, not necessarily, because in this case, we have a counselor that we send officers to, and then we also have a psychologist that's separate. So if I'm sending them to the counselor and the counselor decides what needs to be done, and I get the psychologist that, as far as I'm concerned, he's okay.
But as a chief policy maker for the Wauwatosa Police Department, don't you have a duty to make sure, an ethical duty, that not only is your officer protected, but that the public is also protected?
Absolutely.
So as a chief policy maker, you wouldn't just rely completely on a psychologist for you to make a determination that an officer like Officer Joseph Mensah was okay to return back to work.
Well, since I don't have any medical background whatsoever, I would rely on a psychologist or a doctor. If they clear the person, then if they say yes, then I say he's okay to come back.
So you wouldn't look at whether or not he broke any of your policies that you've written for Wauwatosa Police Department. You would 100% rely on a psychologist to tell you that this officer is okay to return to work.
We do an internal investigation on these on shooting incidents too.
And typically, how soon after an incident do you do these internal investigations?
It varies. Oftentimes we wait until the district attorney makes their determination. Mm-hmm. Because if the district attorney is going to charge the officer, well, then I might as well hold off on the investigation, because it's going to be a whole different set of circumstances. So usually I wait.
Do you recall when you did the internal investigation as it relates to the Antonio Gonzalez shooting?
I don't know the exact date on that one, and I don't conduct the investigation. I usually assign that to somebody.
So the internal investigation, coupled with a psychologist's recommendation whether or not someone is fit for duty to return to work, you would take both of those things and decide whether or not an officer should go back out on the street.
Most likely, yes.
Okay.
Does that mean that an internal investigation was completed prior to Officer Mensah returning to duty?
I don't have it in front of me, Judge. I can't be sure.
Okay, go ahead.
So you're aware of the affidavit that was signed by Jerome Canto dated November 10th, 2020, Exhibit 63. Attorney Safran asked your office and actually sent you a letter asking for Officer Joseph Mensah's personnel file on April 6, 2017. Do you recall that?
I don't recall it, but it must be true.
Okay. And you soon after sent Joseph Mensah's personnel file to Attorney Safran. Do you recall doing that?
I wouldn't have sent it. I would have delegated to somebody who's in charge of records, but yeah, probably.
Okay. But you would have gave permission for, or you would have instructed someone under you to have sent the documents to Attorney Safran?
Yes.
Okay. And in the affidavit that was dated, let's see, November 10th, 2020, he indicated that Antonio Gonzalez's complete personnel file did not include the internal administrative review of the Antonio Gonzalez shooting.
I'm not sure the question was clear because you said Antonio Gonzalez's personnel file.
That's correct. So just to be clear. So Attorney Safran sends you an open records request around April 2017. You responded to that open records request.
Okay.
According to Attorney Safran's office, there was no internal investigative file as it relates to Antonio Gonzalez that his office received as it relates to Officer Joseph Mensah's personnel file.
I wouldn't know that or not.
Okay. So what that's, to me, demonstrates is that at least in April 2017, the Antonio Gonzalez internal investigation did not exist, or that document was not sent to Attorney Safran's office. Do you know which one happened?
I don't.
Okay. Now, as it relates to let's talk about training. That's okay. We might come back to fitness for duty. Do you recall being deposed on February 25th, 2021 by attorney Joy Bertram?
Yes.
And in that deposition, you talked about consistency and how important consistency is to the Wauwatosa Police Department and practices and things like that. Could you explain to the court how important consistency is to Wauwatosa police practices?
I don't know what the frame of reference is that I was referring to, but I would like to think that we would act in a consistent manner and enforce the law in a consistent manner.
Just to be clear, and I'm sorry, I'll give you a frame of reference. When you're discussing consistency, you're talking about squad cars and how every squad car in Wauwatosa, the inside of it is exactly the same. Could you please explain that to the court?
In the marked patrol vehicles, they're all set up identical, so the same controls are in the same place. The buttons are the same, so if an officer has to respond to something in the dark, turn on the lights or whatever, it's all, you can go from one car to another and it's all the same.
Okay. And typically, what are some of the weapons that are inside the Wauwatosa police squad car?
Most of the marked cars for patrol have a shotgun in them and or a rifle.
Mm-hmm.
Depending if the officer is involved with this special response team, they might have other equipment of their own that they carry.
Okay. In terms of the shotgun or rifle, is it inside the squad car?
Yes.
And where is it located usually?
There's a rack that's like in between the seats.
In between the front seats?
In between the front seats, yes. Bucket seats. Bucket seats would be in the middle. Overhead.
Okay. I've never been in a squad car, so sorry. Is it in between the front driver's seat to the front passenger
seat? It's like
seat?
overhead. Some of them are mounted different, but they're more overhead now because whenever I've sat in, I always bang my head on it.
Okay.
Because they try to fit everything in there.
Okay. And it's easily accessible to the officer?
Yes.
Okay. Is it locked in or how is it?
Locked in, it's electronic lock.
And how do you unlock it?
There's a special control button that they use to release it.
Okay. And what are the types of equipment that officers have on them? At least Joseph Mensah, what equipment did he have on him on June 23rd, 2016? That's typical to Wauwatosa police officers.
At that time, he would have had his city-owned Glock 40 caliber handgun. I believe he carried several extra magazines with him. He would have handcuffs, pepper spray, taser, a baton. Those would be the weapons.
Mhm. And in looking at your vehicle contacts training, one of the things that that was mentioned in the training is sort of a pre-squad check before officers go out on the street. Could you please explain to the court what that is?
Before an officer goes on the street, he has to make sure that all the equipment in his car is actually working. So they usually turn on all the lights to make sure and walk around the car, make sure there's no visible damage to the car, because you don't want to be blamed for something that you didn't do it. So make sure the lights work, the siren works, make sure you have a defibrillator in the trunk, make sure your camera works, make sure that there's no other deficiencies with anything.
And based on the vehicle contacts training, if there's anything that does not work, it states that you're supposed to put it on the whiteboard. Is that accurate?
I'm not sure exactly what they use, so the maintenance guys get it. There's a place that they report it, so maintenance takes care of it.
Mm-hmm. And this sort of procedure is something that has been going on how long with the Wauwatosa Police Department, this pre-squad check?
I've been in the business for over 40 years. We've always done pre-squad checks no matter where you're at, so it's been going on forever.
So this is something that would have been required of Officer Mensah on June 22nd, 2016 to do before he went on the street, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And before he went on the street, he would have had to check his, cameras to make sure that they're working, correct?
Yes.
Before he went on the street, he would have had to make sure that his microphone audio recording was functional. Is that correct?
You would think he would, yes.
Okay. Before he went on the street, he would have to make sure that his red and blue lights worked. Is that correct?
Yes.
And typically, how do your red and blue lights, how do you activate that?
There's a switch on the console. It turns them on.
Okay. So you can't activate that remotely as an officer?
No.
Okay. So when, it says that red and blue lights are activating, what does that mean to you?
Somebody's reaching down for the button to turn them on.
Okay. Does it mean that they're on or that someone's in the process of trying to turn them on?
Activating your lights would mean you're turning them on. Once they're activated, then they're on.
Okay. Thank you. So as it relates to, as far as you know, there was nothing in relation to the squad equipment or the equipment that Officer Mensah was wearing on June 22nd and June 23rd that was not functioning correctly.
Nothing that was brought to my attention, no.
Okay. And, sometimes I assume, even with all the checks, maybe there still is equipment that doesn't work. When that's found out, I assume that after the fact, officers would report that information to someone to fix that. Is that accurate?
True.
Okay. And do you recall that after June 23rd, 2016, if Officer Joseph Mensah communicated to you or anyone else within the Wauwatosa Police Department that, for instance, his squad camera did not work?
I heard that later on.
Mm-hmm. Did he put in a written order about his equipment not functioning correctly?
I don't know if he did.
Okay.
It's typically not something I would look at.
Okay. Do you recall being questioned by Steve Biskubich?
Yes.
You doing all right?
Now, in that testimony that was taken, it's already been marked as Exhibit 1 with the court. In that conversation that happened on September 21st, 2020, do you recall Attorney Steve Biskubich and his colleagues asking you about whether or not Officer Mensah's equipment was functioning on June 23rd, 2016?
I don't remember that one specific, but they asked me so many things. They probably did.
And do you recall in that conversation, you not confirming that Mensah's equipment was malfunctioning?
Probably, yes. I would not have any way of knowing that.
Okay. You would not have any way of knowing what?
That is, equipment, whether it was functioning or not functioning, because if it wasn't, he would have reported to the supervisor, not me.
So after the shooting of Jay Anderson, did you do any type of investigation as relates to your subordinate, Officer Joseph Mensah?
When you say investigation, we did a investigation after the district attorney's office declined to file charges. As I said earlier, we'll wait to see if the DA is going to file charges. Then we had the internal investigation started.
You had the internal investigation started after the DA declined to issue charges.
I believe that's when it started.
I'd like to point to you what's already been marked as Exhibit 62. Now, according to Exhibit 62, there is an email, September 2018, where the internal investigation of Jay Anderson was attached to the email. And it was a draft internal investigation report. This was January 2018. Do you recall, and you just testified, that right after the DA's decision, which would have been December 2016, Wauwatosa Police Department did an internal investigation. Do you still think that's accurate?
I'm not sure what you're asking. When was the letter that you're talking about?
The email is dated January 10th, 2018,
Okay.
from Jeffrey Farina to Luke Vedder. And in this email is a draft internal investigation of the Jay Anderson shooting.
Okay.
In this draft, there's also, and this, I'm referring to Exhibit 62. In this draft, there's also four pages that are highlighted regarding the Antonio Gonzalez shooting. It looks like it was cut and pasted from that internal investigation. So my question is, based on this email that's dated January 10th, 2018, it appears that the internal investigation for the Jay Anderson shooting didn't start until 2018. Is that an accurate statement? Would you like to look at this?
Sure. I don't know the date.
Your Honor, if it's all right with the court, I'd like to show the chief
Let him see it.
Exhibit 62.
I think it was your words, counsel, with regard to internal investigation right after the DA's decision. I believe the chief has testified a couple times that this is they wait until that's over before they begin anything. And what was the date? You recall offhand, counsel, what the date is on the district attorney's letter declining prosecution?
It was December 16th, 2016, Exhibit 65. Let's see. December 5th, 2016.
Thank you.
Jesus Christ.
No, you want December 5th.
Those fucking clowns.
Okay, I've read this.
So this report was created over a year and a half after the Jay Anderson shooting. Is that accurate?
This email certainly is. I don't know if they started drafting the report prior to that or not. I don't know.
But you do know that according to the affidavit of Jerome Conkle that was dated November 10th, 2020, that when they received Officer Joseph Mensah's personnel file in April 2017, that this document was not in there.
What's the question?
Do you know when the internal investigation for the Jay Anderson shooting was completed?
I don't know the date, no.
Do you know when the internal investigation for the Jay Anderson shooting, when it started?
I wouldn't know exactly because they probably started putting their stuff together once they got all the completed reports and all that, but maybe they didn't give it to me for a few months, I don't know.
Chief, when you say they, who are you referencing?
In this case, Judge, I'm referring to Lieutenant Mike Schultz and Lieutenant Jeff Farina. They were the ones that we assigned to do the internal.
All right, thank you.
Typically, when officers within Wauwatosa Police Department conduct, internal investigations or create reports and things like that, it's important to date when those things happen. Is that correct?
Yes.
So what's the date that's on that internal investigation of the Jay Anderson shooting that's up there?
The one that you just gave to me is
Not the email of the report.
the report. I don't see a date on it.
Okay. And as you said, it's important typically for officers to date their reports and date their internal investigation. But there's no report on that, correct?
There's no date on it that I can see.
Is it important also for internal investigations to be, signed off on by officers that are conducting those investigations?
Yes.
Who signed this internal investigation?
This one, there's no signatures.
Whose name is on there?
Farina and Schultz.
Thank you. Now, as it relates to the Antonio Gonzalez investigation, and I'm going to show you if it's okay with the court, Exhibit 61.
What are you looking at for a time frame here on this examination?
What is it now? I think we're nearly done.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Chief, would it be correct to assume that at some point in contemplation of an investigation that you would have met with the two individuals that you indicate were tasked with this investigation and give them a go-ahead in advance of their work?
Well, I probably would not have done that. The captain would have done that and said, hey, you guys get this done.
And the captain would have done it at your direction?
Actually, he probably would have brought it up to me and said, we need to get this done. I said, go ahead and do it.
You don't have any independent recollection as to when these discussions took place?
No, I don't.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Now, with regards to Exhibit 61 that I just gave you, that's the Antonio Gonzalez internal investigation that was completed. What date does that report say that this investigation was completed? Not the email.
I don't have a date on this report.
Okay. What's the signature? Who's the person that signed this internal investigation of Antonio Gonzalez?
And on this copy, there's not a signature, but it was submitted by Lieutenant Mastrocola.
Okay. So there's no date, there's no signature on this internal investigation also of Antonio Gonzalez?
At least not on this copy.
Okay.
Maybe the investigation was of the officer, right? Not Antonio Gonzalez?
That's correct, sorry.
Okay.
The investigation was of the incident, period. So you have two internal investigations, one with Jay Anderson involving the Jay Anderson Jr. shooting, and the second involving the Antonio Gonzalez shooting, correct?
Yes.
And in both of those internal investigations, you have two reports that are undated and unsigned. Is that correct?
The ones I have here, I'm not sure if these are the originals that I would have that would be signed and dated.
Thank you. But it is typical, and you said that is important, that Wauwatosa police officers date and sign all their reports or internal investigations. Is
Yes,
that correct?
That is true.
Thank you. Now let's talk about statements that have been made with regards to the Jay Anderson shooting. Has Officer Joseph Mensah ever discussed the Jay Anderson shooting with you?
I think he probably has.
Okay.
that mean you're not sure?
In my informal discussions with him, and when he was on administrative leave, I asked him how things were going, so probably.
Okay.
Now, with regards to your conversations with Officer Joseph Mensah, did he ever tell you that Jay touched his weapon when he encountered him on June 23rd, 2016?
Touched whose weapon?
That Jay Anderson ever touched his own gun while Officer Mensah was encountering him on June 23rd, 2016?
No.
Sorry. Sorry, a lot of folders. Do you recall December 23rd, 2020, you wrote a letter of recommendation for Joseph Mensah to be hired by the Waukesha County Sheriff's Department, correct?
Yes.
And in that letter of recommendation, you wrote that in each of them, and sorry, what I'm referring to is the December 23rd, 2020 letter that's addressed the Waukesha Sheriff's Department as signed by Chief Barry Weber, exhibit number 3. In this letter, you wrote that in each of them, meaning in each of the 3 shootings that Officer Mensah was involved, Mensah was confronted by a person who was arrested and refused to put down their weapon. Where did you get the information from that Jay Anderson refused to put down his weapon?
Jay Anderson had the weapon right next to him. He had access to that weapon and was reaching for the weapon.
Where did you get the information from that Jay Anderson refused to put down his weapon? That would mean that he was touching it and he refused to put it
He was
down.
reaching for the weapon.
Where did you get the information that Jay Anderson refused to put down his weapon?
As I just said, I consider Anderson armed. He had that weapon right next to him within his reach and was reaching for that weapon.
So that's how you're
He
interpreting
was an
refusing?
armed subject, yes, and he refused to follow the officer's directions.
Did anyone ever tell you that Jay Anderson touched his weapon?
But I was told that he was reaching for the weapon. That's
Did
what the
anyone
video
ever,
said.
please answer my
One at a
question.
time, please, counsel.
Please answer my questions
No,
that I'm giving to you. Did Joseph Mensah tell you that Jay Anderson touched his weapon on June 23rd, 2016?
not that I recall that he said that to me.
Did Joseph Mensah tell you that Jay Anderson touched his weapon and also refused to put down his weapon on June 23rd, 2016?
No,
So your interpretation is because there was a weapon there and he didn't touch it, that's how you're determining that he refused to put down his weapon.
that is correct.
You're still sticking with this.
He was armed and he was reaching for the weapon.
It's okay if you made a mistake in this letter, Chief.
No, you can't, but I'm gonna, that question's not gonna be allowed.
Okay, no problem. Now, you indicated that you recall this conversation you had with Steve Biskupich on September 21st, 2020.
Yes,
In that conversation, and this is Exhibit 1, page 57, you told Steve Biskupich that Mensah's gun was on the middle console.
yes.
Who told you that?
That was from the police reports that I ultimately saw.
What police report states that Jay Anderson's, or the gun that was in Jay Anderson's car, was on the middle
I
console?
believe in the compilation of all the reports that I saw, that's what I was told. It was on the middle console.
Who told you that? Did Joseph Mensah tell you that?
I don't believe so. I read those in the reports.
And you don't recall what report, because every report that I've read, it says that there was a weapon that was on the passenger side seat.
I don't remember.
But you actually read a police report that says that the weapon was on the middle console, that you cannot remember.
When I was told that it was within his easy reach, I assumed it's on the console. Whether or not it was on the seat or on the console was within inches.
Well, that's kind of important to know as a law enforcement officer, correct? Where the weapon is.
If you're the officer that's on that scene, absolutely you need to know that.
Isn't it important as a supervisor to the officer in the scene that you also give accurate statements, especially to, when you're being interviewed for an investigation?
Yes.
And you told Attorney Stephen Biskubich, who was interviewing you and conducting an investigation, that the weapon in Jay Anderson's car was on the middle console. But you didn't know that to be accurate.
It was within a couple inches either way, so that's the way I answered
All
it.
right, I think we've covered this, and I'll ask you to reference the transcript also by line,
Okay.
so we know exactly what's being referenced.
So,
And I think the record should reflect it wasn't an interview, it was a deposition.
it's an interview.
Yeah, and I'm saying deposition.
Oh, thank you. So for the record, thank you, Your Honor. What we're referring to is Exhibit 1, page 57, lines 5 through 11.
And why don't you just read those into the record, since they've been referenced several times?
For the record, your answer was, well, I think it was on the console right close to where the driver could reach it. So Anderson could have reached for the weapon and pulled it up really fast, and the officer wouldn't have had a chance to defend himself. So yes, the answer is he was justified in my opinion.
And which lines are those, please?
That was lines 5 through 11.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, according to, you gave several interviews to media outlets as it relates to the Jay Anderson shooting. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And do you recall Officer Joseph Mensah also giving recent interviews discussing the Jay Anderson shooting?
He gave one that I'm aware of to a radio station.
Okay. And did you approve him to do those interviews?
No.
Okay. Based on your conversations and your knowledge of the Jay Anderson shooting, why was Officer Mensah in Madison Park on June 23rd, 2016?
Officer Mensah was assigned to that area of the city to patrol. And he was in the park earlier because there was people in the park after hours, so it was just a matter of routine patrol, and he was in there when he saw the car that Anderson was in.
Okay. But Officer Mensah was not assigned to that area on June 23rd, 2016. Do you know that?
I don't know.
But you just said he was assigned to that area.
The officers can go in different areas. We don't have strict boundaries that they can't go in and out of. I don't know what area he was assigned that night.
Okay. Because it sounded like you made a distinction by saying he was assigned to that area and that's why he was there.
He had every right to be in there.
So just for my clarification, with regards to Officer Mensah, when he's on shift working, he can go anywhere in Wauwatosa. Being assigned to an area doesn't matter. You can just patrol anywhere. Is that how it works?
Not normally. Normally you're assigned to an area. The boundaries overlap depending on what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And if another car is tied up on something, they can patrol another area.
Would you agree that if you have a seasoned officer like Lieutenant Roy, that someone with that experience should be able to make those judgment calls on whether or not they go beyond the assigned areas, as opposed to a rookie officer, as Officer Joseph Mensah was at that point in time.
When you say a rookie officer, how much time did he have on the department?
18 months.
Maybe he came from another department too, so I wouldn't characterize him as a rookie either.
So he's a rookie with the Wauwatosa Police Department.
He had more than 12 months on our department.
But he was a rookie police officer with the Wauwatosa Police Department.
I don't characterize it as a rookie with that time on.
He was a new police officer with the Wauwatosa Police
He was
Office.
a newer officer, but he was not a rookie.
Okay, so newer rookie, potato. He didn't have 20 years on him like Lieutenant Roy, correct?
Correct.
Right. So for him to be beyond his assigned area, only being on the Wauwatosa Police Department for 18 months, would you advise for that to, was that a regular practice for officers that were only with the Wauwatosa Police Department for 18 months to just patrol anywhere in the city of
I
Wauwatosa?
don't think he was patrolling anywhere, and it's not out of character, but that would be something that we'd take up with a supervisor if it was problematic.
I mean, this is not that fruitful unless you have some information about what his assigned area was that night.
I'm going to refer to what's already been marked as Exhibit 59. And according to the interview that Officer Mensah gave to Luke O'Day on June 24th, 2016, which was the day after the Jay Anderson shooting, he indicated that his area that he was supposed to be patrolling he was assigned to the area that encompassed West Burleigh Street to West Capitol, North 92nd Street to North 124th Street. So Burleigh to Capitol, and then 92nd to 124th Street.
That's what we used to call Squad 5's area, and that's what he would have been assigned, and that's where Madison Park is.
Well, do you know the address to Madison Park? Because it's not in that area.
It's still considered part of that squad area, but I don't know what the Madison Park
No, that was
address
me
is.
laughing.
Why, how is it considered part of that squad area? So he didn't mention that in his interview to Luke O'Day on June 24th, 2016, that Madison Park was part of his squad area.
If he's in Squad 5, which is that area that you just described, that's where he'd be.
That's where he was.
It's part of that squad area.
Oh, so he just didn't know where his squad area was? He only knew it was that sort of square perimeter, but didn't know Madison Park was included in that. He didn't tell that to Luke O'Day on purpose. But does that make sense?
It does not make any sense to me, and I would think maybe Mensah would have to talk to Luke O'Day. I don't even know who that is.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not real clear.
Just so you know, Luke O'Day was the lead investigator to the Jay Anderson Jr. shooting. He's a Milwaukee Police Department officer at the time. I believe he was a detective on this day. Now, according to Mensah's sort of interviews that let me just take that back. As you know, Officer Joseph Mensah was involved in Antonio Gonzalez shooting, correct?
Correct.
And in that shooting, he fired his weapon 8 times. Is that correct?
I don't know how many times he fired it, but yes, he fired his weapon.
Okay. And he had a partner with him that fired his weapon 1 time, Officer Newman, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And as it relates to the Jay Anderson shooting, that happened on June 23rd, 2016, he fired his weapon 6 times. Is that correct?
I'm not sure how many times, but okay.
Okay. And as it relates to the Alvin Cole shooting that happened February 2nd, 2020, he fired his weapon 5 times. Is that correct?
I think so, yes.
Okay. So in total, Officer Joseph Mensah fired his weapon 19 times within a 4.5 time period with the Wauwatosa Police Department. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. He gave an interview where he said that the totality of his shootings is not an anomaly in the Wauwatosa Police Department. That essentially, I take that as him saying that it's not unusual for other Wauwatosa police officers to have fired their weapon just as many times, if not more. Is that an accurate statement?
I don't know the context at which he was speaking.
Okay. Sorry. I believe Officer Mensah, in his interview to the media, states that the totality of his 3 shootings is not an anomaly, even within his own department. Would you agree with that statement?
Again, I don't know the context of the whole thing he was talking about or what that was all about.
Officer Mensah stated that the totality of his 3 shootings is not an anomaly within his own department. Do you agree that the totality of the 3 shootings involving Officer Mensah is not an anomaly, even with the Wauwatosa Police Department?
That it's not an anomaly?
Correct.
He was faced with 3 different situations that he was put into a bad spot then too, so I'm not sure how I'd characterize that.
Is it normal for Wauwatosa police officers to shoot 19 times within a 4.5 time period?
That's not a good question. Are you aware of anybody else that's fired their weapon 19 times in the past 30 years while you've been chief?
No, sir, I'm not.
How many times have you fired your weapon in the line of duty while you've been chief?
I have not.
So you've been chief for over 31 years and you haven't fired your weapon 1 time.
I have not.
Thank you. And you were here for Lieutenant Roy's testimony earlier, and he also testified that he's been an officer for 20 years, and he also hasn't fired his weapon for ever since he's been in law enforcement.
Yes.
So do you know if firing your weapon 19 times within a 4.5 year time period, is that an anomaly?
You know, I would answer that by saying, depending on the situation that you're faced with, because officers can't choose what calls they go on. For the situation that he was faced with, I don't think it was.
I think this topic's been exhausted.
Yeah, I think so. So Chief, last thing, we're almost done. We've just received 3 letters as it relates to Officer Mensah's fitness for duty. We have 1 letter dated September 14th, 2020, 1 letter dated August 31st, 2020, and a 3rd letter dated December 15th, 2020.
Yeah.
Prior to the Jay Anderson shooting on June 23rd, 2016, you didn't receive any letters from any psychologist with regards to Mensah's fitness for duty. Isn't that correct?
Not that I'm aware of.
And despite not receiving any letters prior to June 23rd, 2016, you didn't receive any information from any psychologist with regards to Officer Mensah's fitness for duty. Isn't that correct?
No, I don't think that's true. I think I got, when Officer Mensah was going to counseling, I got word from the counselor that he was seeing too, what his status was.
What's the name of the counselor?
Jay Shrinsky?
you spell that for the record?
SCHRINSKY, I believe.
And so Counselor Jay Shinsky, he told you before the Jay Anderson shooting on June 23rd, 2016, that Officer Mensah was fit for duty.
I believe that we were sending Mensah to him, and he probably said that to me because I would get updates from him.
He probably did, but you don't
Probably.
know if he did.
I don't have a date down.
Okay. And Officer Jay Trisky, would you email each other back and forth?
Never.
Never. Why not?
I don't do a lot with emails. I don't do a lot with text messages, as you probably find out.
Mm-hmm.
I talk to people in person,
And you talked to him in person about this.
on the phone.
Do you recall what date you did that exactly?
I don't.
Okay. But you did testify that it's important to, for officers to write reports and also to conduct internal investigations. Isn't that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. So did you write a report about this as an officer who thinks it's important to write reports about things?
I did not write the report.
Why not?
There was no need for me to write the report. The reports have all been documented as to what was transpired on the incident. And once I got word from the counselor that the guy's okay to come back, that was what my concern was.
Mm-hmm. And why was, did you send Officer Joseph Mensah to a counselor after the Antonio Gonzalez shooting to find out whether or not he was fit for duty?
Probably we did, just to make sure that he and the other officer were okay.
When you said probably we did, would you have given that task to somebody else to say that?
I would have.
Who would you have given that task
Probably
to?
one of the captains.
Do you know which one?
Back then, it may have been Captain Sharpie. He may have still been captain before he retired.
So you may have told Captain Sharpie to do what in relation to fitness for duty?
Contact Jay. Let's see if he's okay.
Contact Joseph.
Contact Jay Shrinsky. The
Oh, sorry,
counselor.
Jay. And what does that mean, contact Jay to see if he's okay?
To make some appointments for Joe or for any officer so they can talk to him and see if they're fit to come back.
And Tim Sharpie, he would use emails, correct?
I don't know.
Okay. So he probably didn't just call him. He probably sent an email to Jay.
No, we'd probably call him. We do a lot of things with, I just said, again, I like the direct contact with people.
Okay. But Captain Sharpie would have communicated to you that he had contacted Jay with regards to Joseph Mensah?
Yes.
And he would have sent you an email?
No, everybody just told me about it because I meet with the captains every morning.
So all these communications are conveniently not, there's no record for it.
We talk in person, so we don't document those.
So then why are all these letters that I have from December 15, 2016, August 21st, 2020, September 14th, 2020 in relation to Joseph Mensah's fitness for duty? If you do everything in writing, why do I have these letters?
I don't know where those letters came from.
So prior to December 15, 2016, there are no letters, no written documentation that you have from any psychiatrist about Officer Mensah's fitness for duty.
If I had them, they probably would have been provided already, so I don't have them.
Okay. And if you had them, then you would have given it to the court
As
in
required.
response to the subpoena.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you didn't do that.
No.
So the presumption is they don't exist.
That's what I assume, because we have in the personnel files, there's a medical file, and I think if we had to provide the medical file, then that's already been given out.
But there's no medical information on here.
Okay.
Right? This is just, he's essentially, whether or not he's,
I'd like you to do is identify these letters by date and by author, because he's not been told even who wrote these yet. So
I'm sorry.
I think questioning him about them without that knowledge is a little unfair.
Okay, I'm sorry. So, I'm sorry, Your Honor, I just received this. So the letter dated December 15th, 2016, which I would like to mark as Exhibit 90. It was addressed to you, Chief Weber, and it was signed by a Dr. Rick C. Bauman, last name Bauman, who is an organizational psychologist. Do you recall receiving a letter December 15, 2016 from a Dr. Bauman, Bauman, regarding Joseph Mensah fitness for duty?
Not getting that letter specifically, but Dr. Bauman is our psychologist that we use, so I get a lot of letters from him.
Okay. And based on this letter, and I just received this, so I'm quickly reading it myself, he doesn't give any medical diagnosis. He doesn't, indicate whether or not Mensah's on any medications or not.
I think if you're gonna ask some questions about the contents of the letter, you gotta let them see it.
Sorry, Honor, I thought you wanted to do the recollection.
Well, I believe he indicated he doesn't recall, so
I'm just gonna write on the back, Exhibit 90. Yes.
And who wrote the other letter, Counsel?
The other letters were written by the dates September 14, 2020, was written by Marcia Williams, Marcia Williams, plural. And then this from Systemic Perspectives. And the third letter was written by Dr. Rick Bauman. It's dated August 31st, 2020, with Ascend Talent Strategies.
I believe the two letters offering opinions regarding fitness are signed as organizational psychologists, both of them. Is that right?
Well, the one with Rick Bauman is signed as an organizational psychologist, but Marcia Williams, she's LPC.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to give you all these letters. Do you mind? So I'm going to label the August 31st, 2020 letter as Exhibit 91. And this is the letter that's signed by Rick Bauman. And then the letter of September 14th, 2020, as signed by Marcia Williams, I'm labeling as Exhibit 89. Thanks. Let me know you're ready, Chief.
Yeah, I think it was about 11 o'clock. You told me you're almost done, giving allowance for what that means to lawyers. Are we going to go right up to noon here or what?
I think after we're done with this, we're done.
Okay.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. Let's see. Sorry. Okay. So let's just go in chronological order. And starting with the Exhibit 90, the December 15, 2016 letter. Do you see that?
Yes,
It's a 2-page letter.
yes.
So in this letter that's signed by Dr. Rick Bauman, the last paragraph of the letter is him basically confirming that Officer Mensah can perform patrol office duties without restriction. Do you see that?
Officer duties, yes,
Patrol officer duties without restriction.
yes.
Correct. So this is essentially what is known, and as you see in this letter, there's no medical information. Is that accurate?
Well, he talks about psychological health, so I'd argue that it is medical, but okay.
In this letter, there's no biographical information regarding Officer Joseph Mensah. Is that accurate?
Yes,
Okay. So this is a letter that that's labeled as fitness for duty. Now, based off this letter, You took this assessment and decided that it was okay to put Joseph Mensah back out on the street. Is that accurate?
Absolutely correct.
Okay. So let's go to the letter dated August 31st, 2020, Exhibit 91. Do you see that letter?
Yes.
Now, according to this letter that's signed by Dr. Rick Bauman, he indicated that he only saw Officer Mensah twice, correct?
He doesn't say in this second letter that he saw him twice.
Show them where you're looking.
Okay. So it says maybe just the August 31st, 2020 letter.
Yes.
Okay. So in the first paragraph, he writes, my records show that I originally met with Joseph Mensah on December 1st, 2014.
Yes.
At that time, I performed a psychological assessment in consideration of him as a candidate for the position of patrol officer with the Wauwatosa Police Department.
Yes.
Then the second time he saw him was December 7th, 2016, for the purposes of providing a fitness for duty evaluation.
Okay.
So he saw him only twice.
Okay.
So he did not see, Dr. Rick Bauman did not see Joseph Mensah in between, according to this letter, in between December 1st, 2014 through December 7th, 2016.
I believe that's true.
So he did not see him after the Antonio Gonzalez shooting, but he did see him after the Jay Anderson shooting.
Yes.
Thank you. So let's look at the last letter, the one dated September 14th, 2020. Now, according to this letter that's dated September 14th, 2020, which it's a recent letter, right?
September, yes.
Right. According to this letter, Marcia Williams, who's an LPC, I don't know what that means, a license, something. She indicated that she saw and evaluated Officer Mensah on July 27th, 2015. Do you see that, the first sentence?
Yes.
Okay. Regarding a critical police event that occurred on July 16th, 2015. You see that?
Yes.
In this letter, she did not say that officer was fit for duty after the Antonio Gonzalez shooting. Isn't that correct?
That's true.
In this letter, she does not say that anyone else said that Officer Mensah was fit for duty. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
I have nothing further.
Can I get the name of this woman again, please?
Marcia Williams, Williams plural.
And what was the name of the psychologist again, please?
Rick C. Bauman, Bauman, for both the other letters.
Chief Weber, you indicated that you've had experience dealing with the doctor, Dr. Bauman, correct?
Yes, sir.
And how about Marcia Williams? Have you had dealings with her in the past in connection with the assessment of officers' fitness for duty?
I know the name, Judge, but I don't know her.
Do you know if she works with or under Mr. Bauman, Dr. Bauman?
I don't think she works with him.
Do you have any idea how an officer would have been referred to her?
I do not know.
And you also referenced in the beginning what you called a counselor named Jay Shrinsky, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that, as far as we know, sitting here, was the only assessment of Officer Mensah done subsequent to the Gonzalez shooting. Is that your understanding?
Yes, sir.
And what do you know about the qualifications of Counselor Shrinsky?
I do not know his qualifications. I know he also represents Milwaukee police officers who have been involved in critical incidents too.
Okay, so you're aware of, you have no awareness with regard to either his education or, I'm inferring he's not a psychologist, so, you have any additional information as to what might qualify him to render opinions regarding an officer's fitness?
Not firsthand, Judge.
You would agree, wouldn't you, that with regard to psychological fitness, that ought to be assessed by a psychologist or psychiatrist?
I'm sorry?
I said, if we're talking about someone being assessed for fitness subsequent to a shooting, don't you think it'd be appropriate for somebody to be assessed by either a psychiatrist or a psychologist?
Yes, sir.
Anything further here?
One question. So you have no written proof or written reports or any written proof that there was a fitness for duty evaluation conducted on Officer Joseph Mensah after the Antonio Gonzalez shooting. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Anything further?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Chief Weber. You can step down, put your mask on. I'm going to ask members of the gallery to refrain from making comments to the chief on his way out. I appreciate the way everyone's conducted themselves.